Hey everybody, Professor Snart here. Checking in. It's Wednesday, October 2nd, kind of a rainy, dreary day after a couple of days of like what felt like 90-degree summer heat and humidity, so strange weather. But anyway, here we are in our class. So I'm actually going to take us to our announcements page. So this is what the video that you're watching now will be the first thing in the announcements. But right now, or right below this, once I post it, you'll see this little note about due dates that I sort of screwed up the Unit 4 listings. So they are corrected now, but really they're only corrected for when I would teach this course again. For the online 12 week, I was really rebuilding or building this course more or less from scratch. So I think I might have moved things around and forgotten to change the due dates, but previously, or the due dates that we were operating under, because that's what I had, the mistake that I had in here, had us doing the yellow wallpaper, and there was only this Thursday, October 3rd due date, whereas normally we would have sort of that separate, the dual or double due date system. So I've corrected that, again, more for my own like records moving forward, but obviously we'll stick with that Thursday day as the day that both main work is due for the unit and replies. There's only a couple of replies required, so it's not that big a deal. But you'll probably notice, or you potentially notice, why this kind of setup is more effective for doing like main work but then replying, so that it's not all jammed onto that one day. So anyway, again, I might have just mislabeled it, or I moved things around and forgot to change the due date. Not sure what happened. Having said that, though, you'll notice that one of the few exceptions to our rule, the double due date rule, is actually Unit 5. Again, maybe it was like I moved it around or something. Not sure. That's the capstone, the final unit that we'll do as part of our short fiction section in our Intro to Lit course. Then we move on to poetry. We'll finish up with drama. So we sort of move through the different genres here fairly quickly. But as the capstone, it's a little bit more of an involved project, which we'll look at in just a sec. So we have that extended, a little bit extended time to go all the way to the next Thursday, October 10th, as I'm recording this, for you to do that project. And there's actually no reply mechanism built into Unit 5, so we don't need to worry about that problem of main work and replies like happening on the same day. So just to review then, Unit 4 due October 3rd, Thursday. Both main work posted and replies. The main work had us looking at a couple of different versions or iterations of the yellow wallpaper as a story, one from our textbook, one a digital reproduction of how it actually appeared in its first publication in the New England magazine back in the late 1800s. And just considering those what sometimes feel like maybe minute differences or ones that our eye just sort of glances over and we don't really think about it, but really sort of taking a moment to connect, and I'll actually go into Unit 4 here, to connect some of those differences that, again, maybe we don't necessarily notice so much, back to, as we're doing here in the shared slide deck, how that might color our understanding of characters, of major themes in the work, and that kind of stuff. So again, it's not just noticing differences, or sort of like which do you prefer to read, which is itself kind of an interesting question. But we always want to connect that back to how does that slightly change, or even in a really significant way in some cases, your understanding of, again, characters, themes, the character dynamics going on. So it's not about big changes that have happened in the story, like paragraphs missing, or the end is different, or the names are different, or something like that. It's more, again, sort of like, I don't want to say insignificant, but things that your eye might not really spend a lot of time on necessarily, but that I think, if we do a bit of a deeper dive, we'll discover that they really can affect the way that we might understand the story in terms, again, of like themes and the power dynamics between the characters going on. So again, we're connecting this brainstorming stuff to the actual assignment down here. And like I had mentioned, there is a reply component, so we'll be doing these two things kind of at the same time. I've noticed a bunch of people have already posted the work almost as if it was due on Tuesday, kind of almost in that pattern that you get into. So there's certainly ones to reply to, so I don't think we'll have the problem of too many things happening on exactly the same day. But you'll probably notice that unlike other units, it's harder to reply, or there's just fewer options to reply to when you're trying to go into reply, but the due date for the main work is like, hasn't really even happened yet. Again, my mistake. I've corrected it for future versions of the class, again, more for my own records, but per the announcement here, which you'll see just below this video, we're sticking with that Thursday, October 3rd as the main due date for Unit 4, both completing that main assignment, the shared slide deck, your analysis of the two versions, updating your portfolio, et cetera, posting that, and then doing the reply piece. Okay, so that brings us into Unit 5, our final fiction or short fiction unit for our Intro to Lit class. New reading to do, a really, really fantastic story by an excellent modern contemporary American author, Karen Russell. Definitely look her up if you're interested. Great short story author, some really great novels, funny, kind of like enthralling and captivating, very much like you'll see in this story to greater or lesser degrees. There's almost always this element of what we might call not sci-fi or like true fantasy fiction, but almost like a kind of magic realism that's going on. So this is sort of like a subgenre of short fiction as a genre. And so magic realism is a story that for almost like 99% of it is the world that we know. It's normal people in normal places. They have normal abilities. There's nothing really fantastical about it, except for there's usually just one or two elements in that world or in that universe that it's otherwise recognizable to us that's completely askew, right? That doesn't fit, that is kind of from that world of sci-fi or fantasy. The real important part to notice about this genre, though, is that nobody in the world of the fiction, right, in the world of the story, notices or makes comment on or acknowledges that the thing that is completely unreal and fantastical to us as the reader is completely fantastical and unreal. It's just a part of the world that they live in. And so this one is a really great, you can almost think of it as an extended allegory. So it tells one story, but it's really about something else. It's implying something else. And it's literally in the title. It's St. Lucy's Home, kind of this orphanage slash, school for girls that have been raised by wolves. It's both hilarious, but also a really pointed commentary on identity formation, identity politics, that whole nature versus nurture thing, imposing one set of cultural norms on another group of people just because you think yours are better or more sophisticated or quote unquote right. So for all of its kind of humor and ridiculousness and fantastical, like elements, I think there's a really like kind of sharp social commentary going on. And that's kind of what makes Russell's work so fascinating to read. It's really accessible. There's for me, I laughed out loud, literally laughed out loud moments, but it doesn't mean that it's just like silly or frivolous stuff that you're reading. So a really great way to round out the fiction section of our class. Brief quiz, again, not very many points, really just designed to kind of sharpen your eye for certain elements of the story that maybe you missed the first time around. And here's our project. So in some ways, very traditional. It's basically just a comparison assignment. You're going to take St. Lucy's Home for Girls Raised by Wolves that we're reading for this unit and compare it, i.e. find similarities. Don't focus on differences. We already know that it's different. Between it and another story that we have read for class. Not just any story, but one that we've actually read for class. So again, fairly traditional sort of approach. Comparative, it's cool to see how different authors, maybe from different time periods or cultural backgrounds, tell stories, right? And how on the surface they look or sound or feel very different. They're from very different places, time periods, etc. But if we dig a little bit deeper, they have maybe some really interesting connections between them. So we, as usual, want to really ground our analysis in specific quotation from each of the stories, so it's really concrete. It shouldn't just be that both stories are about some super generic theme like love. They're not about that, but you get the idea. So it's finding some fairly particular points of comparison in terms of maybe thematic stuff, types of characters that are represented, certain kinds of situations that emerge, maybe what we would call the character narrative arc, like how do characters change throughout a particular story. That's interesting to chart those similarities. So again, fairly traditional, straightforward approach, just a comparative analysis of the two works. You have to use the Karen Russell story, and then the other one is your choice. The wrinkle here is that you can do this, present it in whatever format you want that you think is most effective. If you think that that's like a traditional essay, go for it, right? If you feel like a slide deck is the way to go for it. Web page, sure. Audio video, sure. Whatever you think is going to be most effective for communicating your thesis or the points of similarity that you want to draw. But I would also suggest that you want to choose something that's not just the easiest, right? But really that is the most compelling for the reader, which is going to be just me in this case. Although you're certainly, welcome to jump in there and look at anyone else's too. So again, in some ways, I'm looking for that more creative approach than just a slide deck or just text on a page. Not because I'm just personally drawn to that more creative approach, which I am, but because that more creative approach shows that you are actively thinking about how can I best package this analysis so that it's most interesting and most compelling, most convincing for my audience. So it's not just about being creative for the sake of being creative, it's sort of for a purpose. This is worth 100 points, so more than I think almost anything we've done in the class so far. Capstone for the short fiction piece of our Intro to Lit class. So again, I'm really looking for some pretty major investment here as far as analysis goes, but also that compelling approach, the way that you present this information. Obviously, these are not the only choices. They're just kind of throwing some ideas out there. Probably not the most interesting necessarily, but I leave that to you. And if you have an idea that you want to pursue, but you want to, make sure that it's going to work, or you want to run it by me, by all means do so. Just send me an email. We can talk through the idea and then hopefully make it happen. I can help with the tech end of things if you have an idea, but not even really sure how to do it exactly. But I'm hoping that people don't just default to the most sort of obvious slide deck, text on the page sort of a thing. Reminders here, like I said before, direct quotation, really clear articulation of the points of comparison, the similarities that you're looking at. And then, as usual, we'll build out our portfolio, post that link to the discussion board here in Unit 5, and then we are good to go. So again, a little bit longer here. I've done the due dates correctly this time. As we turn around really now on Thursday, right, from our Unit 4, and then a whole week, which is actually a lot of time. It would be a lot of time even in a 16-week class, but in our compressed 12-week, it's even more sort of time on task that you can devote to this. Again, 100 points, a little bit more intensive than stuff that we've done, so keep that in mind as you put your work together. And like I said, feel free to be in touch with early ideas, or if you have a couple options that you're mulling over and can't quite choose, I'm more than happy to talk through, those possibilities with folks. Okay? So, Unit 4, Thursday, October 3rd, and then we'll turn around to our capstone short fiction project.